Welcome back, Spooky Squad. Today, we're diving into one of the creepiest and most intense hauntings from the 1970s that somehow doesn't get nearly enough attention. If you thought the Amityville horror was bad, wait until you hear about the Hinsdale House haunting. This story has it all: ghostly apparitions, shadow figures, violent attacks, and even an attempted exorcism that went horribly wrong. Yet, for some reason, the Hinsdale House hasn't reached the same level of fame as some other haunted houses in the US. But trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be wondering why this terrifying case didn't blow up. So buckle up, because we're going to rural New York in the 1970s, where one family's dream of a peaceful life in the country quickly turned into a nightmare they couldn't escape from. Let's start with some backstory. In the early 1970s, the Dandy family, comprised of Phil and Clara Dandy and their children, were looking for a fresh start. They wanted to leave behind the hustle and bustle of city life and settle down in the peaceful countryside. You know, the classic, we just want some peace and quiet dream. And honestly, who could blame them? The house they found in Hinsdale, New York, seemed like the perfect spot. It was nestled in a rural, secluded area surrounded by nature, the kind of place where you'd expect to raise your kids away from all the craziness of modern life. But here's the thing about old, isolated houses. They often come with a history. And this house? Oh, it had plenty of history. Let's just say the Dandies didn't know what they were getting themselves into. At first, everything seemed fine. The family was excited about their new home and settling into country life. But it didn't take long before strange things started happening. And when I say strange, I mean straight up paranormal. The weirdness started with small, almost unnoticeable things. The Dandies would hear faint noises, like footsteps coming from empty rooms, doors creaking open on their own, and occasionally a whisper that couldn't be traced to any family member. You know, the kind of stuff that makes you stop and think, wait, did I just hear that? But nothing too alarming at first, right? Just the usual old house noises, or at least that's what they told themselves. But it didn't stop there. Pretty soon, things escalated. The family started seeing strange apparitions. Shadowy figures would appear in the corners of rooms, and sometimes they would see these figures lurking outside the house, especially near the woods that surrounded the property. Imagine looking out your window at night and seeing a shadowy figure just standing there, staring at the house. Yeah, no thanks. And then there were the voices, disembodied voices calling out the family members' names. Can you even imagine hearing your name whispered in the dead of night when no one's around? The family couldn't figure out where the voices were coming from, and no matter how much they tried to ignore it, the activity only got worse. Now, here's where things get really scary. As time went on, the paranormal activity became more aggressive. Objects would move on their own. Lights would flicker uncontrollably, and not in the, oh, it's probably just an electrical issue kind of way. We're talking lights turning on and off by themselves, even after being disconnected. But the worst part, the physical attacks. Family members, especially the children, would wake up with scratches and bruises on their bodies. At first, they thought maybe it was just accidental, like maybe they scratched themselves in their sleep or bumped into something. But the scratches were deep, almost like claw marks. And the bruises? They appeared in places that couldn't be explained by simple accidents. The youngest members of the family were particularly targeted by whatever dark force was inhabiting the house. And then there was Clara, the mother of the family. She claimed to have been strangled by an unseen force while lying in bed. Imagine that for a second, being in your own bed, the place where you're supposed to feel safest, and suddenly feeling hands around your throat, but no one's there. Clara was terrified, and who could blame her? The Dandy family was officially living in a nightmare, and no amount of rational thinking could explain what was happening. But it didn't stop there, because apparently, whatever was haunting the house didn't just stay inside. One of the eeriest aspects of the Hinsdale haunting is the reports of shadowy figures seen lurking in the woods around the house. You know how in every horror movie, there's that one person who decides it's a good idea to go out into the creepy woods at night? Yeah, don't be that person. The dandies, especially the children, would often spot these figures standing at the edge of the trees, just watching the house. And here's the creepy part. No matter what time of day it was, these figures would appear. They weren't just nighttime terrors. Sometimes, in broad daylight, the family would catch glimpses of them out of the corner of their eyes. Dark, human-like shapes blending in with the trees, almost like they were waiting. It wasn't just the family that saw them either. Visitors who came to the house would report seeing the same shadowy figures in the woods, along with feeling an overwhelming sense of dread as soon as they stepped onto the property. It's one thing to hear about strange things happening from people who live in the house, but when outsiders start experiencing the same stuff, that's when you know something serious is going on. By this point, the Dandy family was at their wits' end. They couldn't live like this anymore. They'd tried everything to get rid of whatever was haunting the house. Prayers, blessings, even trying to ignore it in the hope that it would just go away on its own. Spoiler alert, it didn't. So as a last-ditch effort, they called in a priest, Father Alphonsus. Now, if you're a fan of horror movies, you know where this is going. The moment a priest shows up, you know things are about to get real. Father Alphonsus came to the house with one goal in mind, to perform an exorcism and rid the home of whatever dark forces were tormenting the family. But here's the kicker. The exorcism didn't work. In fact, it seemed to make things worse. After the exorcism, the paranormal activity escalated even further. It's almost like the house, or whatever was haunting it, was angry that they'd tried to drive it out. The attacks on the family became more frequent, the shadows in the woods seemed to multiply, and the sense of dread that hung over the house was stronger than ever. It's safe to say that Father Alphonsus had done all he could, but whatever was haunting the Hinsdale house wasn't going anywhere. With the situation spiraling out of control, the Dandy family finally made the decision to leave the house. And honestly, who could blame them? They'd been living in constant fear for years. The physical attacks, the voices, the shadow figures, it was all too much. They fled the house, leaving behind what was supposed to be their peaceful country life. But even after they left, the house didn't stop being haunted. In fact, the dark reputation of the Hinsdale house continued to grow. Paranormal investigators and ghost hunters began to take an interest in the property, with many reporting strange and terrifying experiences of their own. After the Dandies fled, the house sat vacant for a while. But the legend of the haunting spread. Paranormal investigators from all over the country were drawn to Hinsdale, eager to see if they could capture evidence of the activity that had driven the family away. One of the most famous investigations of the Hinsdale house was conducted by Ed and Lorraine Warren. Yes, the Ed and Lorraine Warren, the same couple who worked on the Amityville horror case. The Warrens were well known for their work with some of the most notorious haunted locations in the world, and when they arrived at the Hinsdale house, they weren't disappointed. During their investigation, the Warrens reported feeling an overwhelming sense of darkness and oppression inside the house. Lorraine Warren, a psychic medium, claimed to have made contact with several spirits, some of whom she believed were tied to the land itself, like there was something ancient and malevolent attached to the property long before the Dandy family ever moved in. And it wasn't just the Warrens. Other paranormal teams who've investigated the house over the years have captured EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, strange fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, and even shadow figures on camera. The house seems to have a life of its own, with or without people living there. So, what was really going on at the Hinsdale house? There are a few theories out there, and honestly, none of them are comforting. One popular theory is that the house is built on cursed land. The area around Hinsdale has a long history, and some believe that the land was once the site of violent Native American battles or sacred rituals. If that's the case, the dark energy could be tied to the land itself, and no amount of exorcisms or prayers would be able to cleanse it. Another theory is that the house attracted something malevolent, like a demon or dark spirit. The fact that the activity became worse after the exorcism suggests that whatever was haunting the Dandy family wasn't your average ghost. It was something much darker, and it had no intention of leaving. There's also the possibility that the house is a portal. Some paranormal investigators believe that certain locations act as doorways between our world and the spirit world. If that's the case, then the Hinsdale House could be one of those places, a thin spot where spirits, both good and evil, can easily cross over into our world. Whatever the explanation, one thing is clear. The Hinsdale House isn't your average haunted location. So what's the deal with the Hinsdale House today? Believe it or not, the house still stands, and it's become something of a paranormal hotspot. In recent years, the house has been restored and is open for tours, overnight investigations, and ghost hunts. Paranormal enthusiasts from all over the world come to Hinsdale to experience the haunting for themselves. And guess what? The activity hasn't stopped. Visitors regularly report strange phenomena, everything from flickering lights and cold spots to full-on apparitions, and yes, those infamous shadow figures in the woods. Some people claim that the haunting is even stronger now than it was back in the 1970s. If you're brave enough, you can actually stay overnight at the Hinsdale House. But fair warning, not everyone who spends the night there makes it through without experiencing something paranormal. So what do you think? Is the Hinsdale House really haunted by malevolent spirits, or is it just an overblown ghost story? The Dandy family certainly believed it was real, and after everything they went through, it's hard to blame them for fleeing. But whether you're a skeptic or a believer, one thing's for sure, the Hinsdale House has earned its place as one of the most chilling yet lesser-known haunted houses in the U.S. If you ever find yourself in upstate New York and feel like getting up close and personal with a haunted house, you know where to go. Just don't say, "I didn't warn you." Thanks for tuning in, Spooky Squad. If you liked this video, make sure to hit that like button, share it with your fellow ghost lovers, and don't forget to subscribe for more haunted stories coming your way. And if you've ever visited the Hinsdale House, or if you've got a haunted location in your area, drop it in the comments below. I love hearing about new spooky spots.